CuriosityStream has thousands of documentary films and shows available on demand on any device. We're the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. There sure are a lot of streaming services, aren't there? CuriosityStream is the one you definitely need if you're the type to nature dock and chill, if you're an armchair astronaut, if you prefer physics to psychics, or perhaps you know a precocious paleontologist. Go to curiositystream.com to learn more and sign up today.
Odyssey now has hundreds of new exclusive music stations for you to discover your new summer soundtrack.
Get moving with worthy workouts for a cardio sesh fueled by today's top artists.
Hanging with your crew? Throw it back with Picnic Party for old school jams for your cookout.
Or sail away with Odyssey's new yacht rock station, Jugger Yacht.
For summer barbecues, road trips,
or relaxing poolside.
Hundreds of new exclusive stations, plus all your favorite local radio stations and podcasts. It's all on Odyssey.
Brought to you by Macy's, Geico, and Coke Zero Sugar.
Knowledgeable.
Listen, here's what's wrong with your hypothesis, your theorem, your supposition, your postulate.
Honest.
If that front ain't in gangsta, your back end won't be able to show its full potential.
Understanding.
You're going to suck. You're going to suck for the next couple of years.
Passionate.
I'm all over social media. I live it.
This is the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Radio.com app.
Hashtag facts.
It's the Kevin Sheehan Show. Now, here's Kevin.
And for the Caps' first odd-man break.
Vrana with speed off the bench, right on in forehand. He scores! Jacob Vrana in a flash.
Took all of 90 seconds, and Jake the Snake did not play a whole lot in the third, but man, did he come out flying here with his only shift in overtime. And the rocket ship he launches with his feet and his stick and puts it upstairs to give the Caps a big 2 points. Verona with a pair of goals tonight.
Joe Beninati, Craig Laughlin on the call last night. The Caps blew a 3-goal lead in the span of just over 7 minutes in the third period, giving up 3 to the Devils. But Verona bails them out in overtime with the goal. A minute 30 into the extra session, and the Caps are on a roll right now. 5-4 winners last night in overtime over New Jersey, a team that they have handled now 3 times in their last 6 games, and they've got more to go with Jersey. They have 4 more games against the Devils this year. This was the stretch of schedule that when we had Joe B on the show last week, he said, look, you get Boston twice, you get Philadelphia 3 times, you get Jersey in between, and they're doing pretty well. The game that obviously they lost Tom Wilson to a 7-game suspension in is their only loss on Friday night to Boston. They've beaten Boston, they've beaten Philadelphia, they've beaten Jersey. 2 more with Philly coming up. Tarek El-Bashir from The Athletic, who is one of my favorites, will join us a little bit later on in the show at 7:30, 7:35, something like that, to talk Caps and to get into something we really have not spent enough time on this week, and that is the Tom Wilson suspension, which I have some thoughts on that I'll share with Tarek at 7:40. Good morning, everybody. Larry Hogan, if you live in the state of Maryland, and I am a Marylander. I am a Marylander, but I am soon going to become a DCer. Yeah, I'm moving. We're in the midst of a move right now, in the midst of a bit of a renovation and then a move back into the district. I've lived in the district before. I've lived most of my life in Montgomery County, Maryland. Grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, in the enclose suburbs, always within a half mile of the D.C. line. I've lived in D.C. before, lived in AU Park in Upper Northwest many years ago, and we are moving back into D.C. We're not sure about the move date, but it's going to be in about a month. But I did see that Larry Hogan is essentially now easing all of the COVID-19 restrictions. He's going all in here. Larry Hogan yesterday said he will lift capacity limits on indoor and outdoor dining, retail businesses, fitness centers, and religious establishments, the most dramatic steps taken toward reopening in the region since the winter surge in coronavirus cases. It does feel like we have turned a corner. Cases down, deaths down, and a lot of states starting to feel a little bit more comfortable about opening back up. I have my youngest of 3 sons, home from Penn State. It's not spring break. In fact, how about this one? They didn't get a spring break. There is no spring break. There are, I think they call them 4 to 5 allowed mental days. That may be the wrong description that they can take. But he's going to Florida anyway because all of the classes they're taking are on Zoom anyway. So he could be home, he could be in Florida, but he's doing the Florida spring break thing and just going to, I guess. What do you think? Do you think he'll actually attend his Zoom classes from Florida?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right. But he came home and last night walked in at about 10:30 after being out, and he said everything shuts down here early. And I guess it had not been necessarily in Pennsylvania, not in a college town anyway. I've got a question for the day, and we are now into our final 3 shows before Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week, before we will start getting a lot of free agency news. You know, the legal tampering period begins the 15th, and then the actual league calendar opens the 17th. But when we come in here on Monday, that will be the day we will start to hear news, if we don't, over the weekend, about teams and players and teams coming to agreement with players that won't be able to be signed officially until the league calendar begins. But I want right now, as we approach these final 3 days, which we will have a lot of discussion about off-season, free agent, traded for, drafted players over the next couple of months, I want right now your number 1 target, free agent or traded for player, not drafted. We've got plenty of time for the draft. As we enter this period of free agency and more trades, I want your number 1 free agent or traded for player. The one you're hoping for. I want it to be realistic, right? Patrick Mahomes is my number 1 also, but it's got to be realistic in terms of the player that they can acquire. Who's your number 1 acquisition target that you want for the Washington football team? All right, we will take some calls on that a little bit later on. John Keim will be with us at 7 this morning. We're going to rip through a bunch of names to see what John's been hearing. I'm also going to share with you, before John comes on, a couple of names I've been hearing as well. And we will start to do a lot of that here in the final 3 days. But Keim at 7, Tarek El-Bashir, roughly 7:30, 7:35, somewhere in that neighborhood. And Mickey Spagnola, who's been on this show many times over the years. Mickey is one of the most trusted voices for Cowboy fans, for Cowboy Nation, has been writing for DallasCowboys.com forever. Mickey's going to be our guest at 8. He calls me his wake-up call, 7 a.m. Central Time. We'll have him on at 8 to talk about Dak Prescott and what the reaction to that deal in Dallas is among the fans, among media members, among the team. I think that there has been this feeling of real affection for Dak Prescott in recent years from Cowboy fans, and a real understanding, by the way, of just how badly Dallas screwed it up with Prescott. You have to have, and we've talked about this many times in the past, you have to have your front office, your key decision makers, when it comes to a key position like quarterback, they got to have vision. They have to have anticipation, because you cannot let it go too far before it becomes too late and it costs you too much. And that's what happened to the Cowboys. Let's start the morning with a couple of what do you gots.
All right.
What do you got?
Well, first of all, I want to wish number 1 right now for me, Brendan, and I don't know what your number 1 is right now in terms of sports watching, but number 1 for me right now is college hoops. You know, we're into conference tournament weekend. We didn't get that last year. We are a couple of days away from Selection Sunday. And for me, it is following what I would call my 1A. 1 and 1A are the Washington football team and the Maryland basketball team. That's always been my top 2. You know, the Wizards are probably number 2, though they are number 2. And those are the 3 teams that I get the most passionate about. That's where I have really deep-rooted fandom. Washington football team, Maryland basketball, and the Wizards. And it's been painful, certainly, for the Washington football team and the Wizards. And to a certain extent, over a several-year period, in March, it's been pretty painful if you're a Maryland basketball fan. Brendan, actually, I would say, is the first producer I've ever had on this show where I think our rooting interests sort of align. You are a huge Terps fan, correct?
That's true. I would say we have the same top two. I would put the Caps ahead of the Wizards for my number 3, but that's only because the Wizards are tough to watch at times.
But you're more of a basketball fan than you are a hockey fan.
If the Wizards, if they reach their full potential, they would be ahead of the Caps for me.
Are you an NBA fan more than a college basketball fan?
Yes, I am now. I didn't used to be. Now it's just Terps, and I'll watch, when big games are on, but I'll watch a big-time NBA game over a big-time college game.
Did you watch the Gonzaga-BYU game last night?
I did not because I was in bed, but if I didn't have this schedule and I was working
How you doing with this new schedule?
It's been an adjustment, I would say. I'm feeling better about everything now. Like, waking up at 4 o'clock is an adjustment for me, coming from like 7 or whenever my daughter wakes up. But it's going good now, I'd say. I'm in the groove.
More importantly, how is it going for your wife?
Not great. Not too great.
She doesn't like you getting up that early because she gets up as you get up.
So she is not quite getting up yet. I've at least made it so I get dressed downstairs. I don't do anything upstairs. As soon as I'm up, I just leave the room and make sure I'm as quiet as possible when I do it.
What about showering? Do you shower before you come to work?
I shower at night now. I shower, the last thing I do before I go to bed now is shower.
I think that's a very underrated thing, is showering before bed. When I shower before bed, which I do, and ever since, moving into the mornings now for several years, there are times where I do what you do, which is shower at night. Getting into a clean bed after a shower, I think is a great feeling.
It's a really underrated feeling. I didn't really get it until I started doing it, and now I love it.
Love it. Love it, especially if you've got, a recent change of sheets and pillowcases and the bed is tight and clean. Yeah, I like that. But I would say that still more often than not, I shower when I get up. I will be in the shower somewhere around between 4:15 and 4:45, depending on the morning. One of the reasons is, and I think you probably can appreciate this as a producer of sports talk radio for a long time, many of your best ideas come in the shower.
That's also true. Something I'm learning now.
I will sit there and I will have more ideas driving and in the shower for the show than I ever have. But anyway, I did stay up to watch Gonzaga BYU. For whatever reason, the last 2 nights have not been great sleep nights. Sleep, by the way, is very underrated as well. Showering before bed, jumping into a clean bed is underrated. Sleep is very underrated. But I watched Gonzaga BYU last night, in part because I had the game. Yesterday was a really, really good day for underdogs. All right, I had Miami plus 3.5 against Pitt. They were a major anti-public play. I had, actually, shouldn't say all underdogs, because I had Duke laying 13, which was a big number against Boston College, and the public was actually betting BC. That game was never in doubt. Very big, interesting game tonight between Duke and Louisville in the ACC. If you are a bubble team, and Maryland's not a bubble team currently, they could move towards bubble status, but I think more like last 4 buys or last 4 in status with a loss to Michigan State tomorrow. You're rooting for certain teams to lose. It'd be nice to see Duke lose and not become part of the conversation. Most people think Duke has to win the ACC tournament, and I would subscribe to that, but we know what happens. The NCAA tournament, more than anything else, is a television show, and not having Duke in it, is not a good thing for the television ratings of that television show. Wake Forest was a 9-point underdog. Nobody had them against Notre Dame. They led the entire way, and they lost by 3. They covered last night. It was one underdog after another, which led to the final game of the day, which was BYU Gonzaga for the West Coast Conference Tournament. If some of you are just now gearing up for March Madness, we get Selection Sunday this weekend, and you haven't watched Gonzaga play, I would suggest that you do watch Gonzaga play. Of course, the issue is the teams that Gonzaga has been playing for the last couple of months in that West Coast Conference. But last night, Gonzaga was down 9 with about 7.5, 8 minutes to go in the game, and it looked like they were on the verge potentially of losing their first game of the year. My son walked in at that point. Remember, I told you he got home at about 10:30 last night because everything was shutting down. But, in Maryland, it soon will not be shut down as much anymore. Gonzaga's down 68-59, down 9 points, and BYU's good. BYU's got a chance to win a game in the tournament. They're going to be a tournament team. And then Jalen Suggs, who is a freshman guard for Gonzaga and is a projected lottery pick next June. Suggs took the game over, had a bunch of big shots, a bunch of big threes, and they went on a run at the end of that game, a 29-9 run to win by 10 points, 88-78 to win that game. So explosive is Gonzaga. By the way, if you don't know this, Kispert, Suggs, and Timmy are all projected first-round picks off of one team from Spokane. A team from Spokane, Washington, in the West Coast Conference, it is Gonzaga, projected to have 3 first-rounders, potentially 2 of those 3 being lottery picks off of one team. It's not Kentucky, it's Gonzaga. Mark Few has built a powerhouse in Spokane, Washington. They are 26-0. They're the first team since Kentucky in 2015 to enter the NCAA tournament undefeated, and will try to become the first team since the 1976 Indiana Hoosiers to go undefeated from the beginning until the very end of the season and win a national championship. I personally now have seen Baylor enough to know that they are a legitimate contender to win the title. Gonzaga, I do believe, is a legitimate contender to win the title. I think the problem that Gonzaga runs into every single year is they go 2.5, 3 months without playing top-flight competition. They played Virginia in December and beat them by 23. They played Iowa in December and beat them by, I think, 15 or something like that. They had a game scheduled early in the year against Baylor, which got canceled. They blew out Kansas to start the season, and they had a very good game way back when. I want to say this was early December, late November against West Virginia, where West Virginia led for a big portion of that game, but Gonzaga ended up winning that game 87-82. And in that particular game, you had Suggs having one of the worst games that he had all year, and yet Gonzaga overcame it. Jalen Suggs, if you've been watching Gonzaga, 6'4" point guard, freshman. He's averaging close to 15, close to 6 assists, somewhere in that area, and he looks like the real deal at the next level. Mark Few's never won a national championship. He lost that final that one year to North Carolina, where I thought they were absolutely hosed officiating-wise in that championship game a few years ago. But this looks like maybe their best team and their best chance to do it. So you get Selection Sunday, and Gonzaga will be a 1 seed. That's a lock. Baylor's going to be a 1 seed. That's a lock. Michigan and Illinois right now would appear to be the other 1 seeds. There is some discussion about, if Illinois falters, but Illinois has been playing great. Illinois and Michigan are both threats to win the national championship as well. The Big Ten, 4 teams out of the Big Ten will be in the top 8 seeds of the draw. That's pretty impressive. I don't know if that's happened before. I haven't followed that part of the story. But to have Illinois, Michigan, Iowa, and more likely than not, Ohio State as 4 of the top 8 seeds in the draw from one conference. That's pretty amazing. And Gary Williams told us the other day that when I said, do you think this is the best conference you've ever seen? He said, through the top 7, yes, but he still thinks it's a soft bottom with Nebraska and Northwestern. I would just disagree slightly. Nebraska's actually been a bit of a live dog here recently, and Northwestern's been capable all year at times. Northwestern at one point in this season, all right, the Big Ten is the best league from a metric standpoint. It's already been measured top to bottom as the best league of all time, going back to, I think, 1985 when they started keeping some of these key numbers. But the interesting thing about the Big Ten at the bottom is that Northwestern, who will finish next to last or somewhere in that neighborhood, at one point this year was ranked. At one point this year, they had a 3-game winning streak over Michigan State, Indiana, and Ohio State, and they were ranked. They're currently among the Big Ten teams out of 14 teams in the Big Ten. Yeah, the Big Ten has 14 teams. They were ranked. Minnesota is right now the 13th team in the Big Ten. Not only were they ranked, I think they got as high as number 12 in the country at one point. Minnesota at one point looked like a really difficult team. They beat Ohio State. They beat Michigan. Minnesota beat Michigan by 20 in January. They beat Purdue. They beat Purdue right before they beat Maryland. Right before Maryland beat them for the second time. That actually reminds me of something that I'm just going to mention real quickly because I don't think I've talked about this, but there were people that had tried to tell me after Maryland lost to Penn State the other night that Maryland's 5-game win streak was a, quote, con job, that they didn't beat anybody. And really what they were referring to is of those 5 wins, there were the back-to-back games against Nebraska. And then people pointed to the fact that Minnesota has essentially tanked down the stretch. Well, none of that is really true. Minnesota had just beaten Purdue and had not quit yet and were still healthy with Gabe Kalsher. They lost a couple of players, which really accelerated, if you will, their decline down the stretch. Maryland sort of started that decline beating them. Maryland beat Rutgers at Rutgers when Rutgers had won 5 of 7 with their only 2 losses to Iowa and Michigan. Maryland beat Michigan State after Michigan State had beaten 2 top 5 teams. You know, it's like the world we're living in right now. Sometimes the truth will do. The exaggeration, the hyperbole, when we try to make our point, sort of, to me, masks the message. The truth will do. They lost a game at Northwestern, which was not a good loss, and they gagged one away against Penn State. Turgeon had them, didn't have them ready for Penn State. They came out flat. You can't come out flat in a game you have. That's coaching. Flat is when you pretty much come out and you get your ass kicked. They were up 12-0 to start the game. Nothing says the opposite of flat more than a 12-0 start to a game. Nothing says the opposite of flat more than leading by 16 in the first half and then after having a lead cut to 3 in the second half, having the lead extended back to 14. They weren't flat, dum-dums. They gagged it. They choked it away. They had a lead. They had total control of the game because they weren't flat for the first 30-some minutes, and then they played poorly down the stretch. They got tight as Penn State got closer. Their defense failed them for the first time in weeks, and offensively, they became very stagnant. And he didn't figure out a way to get him out of it. He went with sort of matchups, and it didn't pay off for him. He went with Eric Ayala down the stretch, didn't pay off for him. They weren't flat against Penn State. That's a dumb take. This all gets to what my what do you got was. It took a while to get there. My what do you got is a congratulations to one of my favorite players of the last 4 years in sports, and his name is Darryl Morsell. He is Maryland's senior off guard who can play small forward, who can play power forward, who can play point guard. He can play a lot of different things. Darryl Morsell was voted the defensive player of the year in the Big Ten. And I'm really, really happy for him. He has really been, without question, the heart and soul of this team for a couple of years. The toughest kid, their best defender, never their best offensive player. Never. It's always been Darryl Morsell when he's had the ball. If you're a Maryland basketball fan, you know that it's, what's going to happen? Is he going to turn it over? Is he going to turn it over? But he's made a lot of big offensive plays this year, a lot of big shots. But he was named the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, the first time a Maryland basketball player in any of the leagues they've been in, the ACC or the Big Ten, has been named Defensive Player of the Year. He totally deserves it. He is a lockdown defender. He gets assigned to the best player. He gets assigned to the hottest player if the best player isn't the best player in that game. He is 6'5". He is muscular. He can move. He is rangy. He is smart. He anticipates well. More than anything else, he tries hard. He's relentless, and he is a competitor. I love Darryl Morsell. I loved him when he came in. I thought this team, off of the Mello Trimble teams, needed more toughness, and Mark recruited it, and he's gotten a lot out of Darryl Morsell. Darryl Morsell is a senior. But if you're just tuning in to the sport of college basketball here on March 10th, you may not know this, but these players are essentially getting this year, this COVID-19 year, free. It does not count in terms of their eligibility. Darryl Morsell can come back and play a fifth year next year if he wants to. I don't know if he will. There's certainly the opportunity for him, who he's a little bit older, to move on with his career. He's not an NBA player, really, I don't think. But there's probably a career for him somewhere overseas, as there is for a lot of American college basketball players. And it's a good living. Not only is it a good living overseas, it's really a very good experience for a lot of these players. I've mentioned Darren McClinton's name before. Darren McClinton is a friend of mine. Darren McClinton was a great college basketball player at James Madison. Look this up, Brendan. I think Darren McClinton may be James Madison's all-time leading scorer. He's way up there. His brother, Kevin McClinton, played at Maryland. Kevin was a really good player for Gary's first few teams here when they were on probation. Their father, the late Harold McClinton, was a longtime middle linebacker for the Washington Redskins under George Allen and was a really good player in the 70s. One of the first players I remember. I mean, number 53 was a mainstay for the Redskins. But Darren had I got to know Darren a little bit. He interned here at the station. He coached some of my boys. He's been a longtime coach in the area and trainer in the area. Darren had one of these careers that spanned like 16 years overseas. He was not good enough. He had chances in the NBA, but never caught on with an NBA team, but had a prolific career overseas where he played, and if he's listening, he'll text me. It's something like 12 or 13 different countries with, over like a 16 or 17-year period overseas. And that's that experience, that you get playing in that many places and living in that many places, and language and culture and all of that stuff that you have to adapt to, in many ways is a better life experience than playing in the NBA. And he's one of the guys that, you sit there and talk to him, and you can tell all the experiences he's had. And it sort of makes for a more well-rounded person. Anyway, my point is that guys like Darryl Morsell, when you see that they don't take advantage of the opportunity to come back and play, when they have a chance, and you know, players that go early that you're like, well, that guy isn't going to get drafted, and they don't. It's not about just getting drafted. It's about starting your professional earning career, and they can do that overseas, and they can make a good living. And in a lot of those places, housing's picked up, cars are picked up, a lot of the expenses are picked up as well. And then you get the international, you know, living experience to go with that, and the exposure to that also comes. Let's see. Darren's in Phoenix right now, training sticks. He's back later today. All right, thank you for that. That was not from Darren. That was from Mello Trimble's agent, Mike, who just texted me that. Darren's been a longtime trainer, worked out a lot of guys. There was a few years ago, Darren was coaching at Landon. I think it was at Landon. May have been at Bullis, whatever. And I remember talking to him, and Durant had been in town, and he said, yeah, I just left Kevin. And I said, Kevin, who? Yeah, Durant. For what? He called me up, wanted to work out. So he works out a lot of pro players as well. He's had a really interesting, professional experience since leaving James Madison. And really, one more story. Darren's going to probably be embarrassed, me talking about Darren McClinton. The name McClinton in Montgomery County, Springbrook, legendary. The father, Harold, a legendary linebacker. But Darren was actually interned at the station several years ago. And we're sitting in my office one day, and out of nowhere, Lefty Drizel calls me. There was a period of time where Lefty called a lot of people in the media. This was before he got into the Hall of Fame. And Lefty would call and say, Kevin, it's Lefty. Do you know, and he'd name some reporter from some blog or some outlet. And I would say, I'm not familiar, Coach, with that person. And he would say, I think they're the ones that are keeping me out of the Hall of Fame. They wrote something about me many years ago, and I think people are using that article to keep me out of the Hall of Fame. Ultimately, Lefty got his justly deserved placement into the Hall of Fame. One of the great Hall of Fame speeches, by the way, in recent years. Look that up on YouTube. But as he called me, Darren McClinton was sitting there, and I said, it's Lefty calling. He's like, what's Coach calling you for? Because he played for Lefty at James Madison. I handed the phone to Darren, and I said, hey, one of your former players wants to talk to you. And the two of them, I think, were on the phone for like an hour and a half. Lefty had a great relationship with his former players, and his former players loved him as much playing for him as they did as they got older as well. Anyway, congrats, Daryl Morcell. That was my what do you got? Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten. Totally deserves it. Not one Maryland player made the top 3 teams, which probably is accurate. You know, I'm looking at the Big Ten top 3 teams, and there isn't a player, I don't think, that I would have had Aaron Wiggins, Daryl Morcell, or Eric Ayala in over. I don't know. There was perhaps Joe Wieskamp, who ended up being the second team player, but they did make Ayala and Wiggins both named the 5-team honorable mention, which for all intents and purposes is like the 4th team Big Ten. Wiggins, by the way, if he had been playing the way he's been playing over the last month, played that way the whole year, he would have been, I think, somewhere on the All-Big Ten 2nd or 3rd team. He's playing very well right now. Big game for the Terps here tomorrow morning, 11:30 a.m. We will carry that, right, live tomorrow, even though it's an 11:30 a.m. Thursday game. Is that right, Brendan?
Yes, I believe pregame starts at 11.
Pregame at 11:30 against Michigan State. And we will have more on that game tomorrow morning. Congrats, Daryl Morcell. Love him. Defensive Player of the Year in the Big Ten. All right, when we come back, I want to get to the question that I asked. The question being, give me the one player, and I tweeted it out early on today, and that tweet really represents almost a borderline poll. So it's presented by Window Nation. Searching for new windows and doors, search windownation.com. Their windows are measured to fit the first time and installed by experts to last. Window Nation for your home because it's where you live. By the way, yesterday's poll on Brandon Sheriff Whether or not it was a good move or a bad move was an overwhelming bad move response from most of you. 65.6% of you said signing him to a second franchise tag was the wrong move. 34.4% of you said it was the right move. So the question here, 301-230-0980, I want your number one free agent or traded for player hope for Washington. All right, the number one guy you want. I don't want your whole plan. I want somebody realistic, and I want to know who that person is. We're into these final 3 days before we start getting real news. By the way, a lot of players, and some of you have said Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson was tagged. We'll go through the list of tagged players when we come back, in addition to Brandon Sheriff. And maybe as significant were the players that were not tagged yesterday. We'll get to that. I want your number one acquisition in free agency or a player you want Washington to trade for. It's all going to start going down here over the next week or so. Give me that number one player. And yeah, it is hard. Somebody tweeted this to me. It's really hard to know because we don't have a list of all of the players that are going to get released here before the league calendar begins. That's true. But you know who is currently a free agent. You can project someone who's going to get released, and now you know the list of players who have been tagged. I'll give you my number one, and it's got to be realistic when we come back, and I want yours at 301-230-0980. John Keim will join us at 7. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show.
CuriosityStream has thousands of documentary films and shows available on demand on any device. We're the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. There sure are a lot of streaming services, aren't there? CuriosityStream is the one you definitely need if you're the type to nature dock and chill, if you're an armchair astronaut, if you prefer physics to psychics, or perhaps you know a precocious paleontologist. Go to curiositystream.com to learn more and sign up today.
Odyssey now has hundreds of new exclusive music stations for you to discover your new summer soundtrack.
Get moving with worthy workouts for a cardio sesh fueled by today's top artists.
Hanging with your crew? Throw it back with Picnic Party for old school jams for your cookout.
Or sail away with Odyssey's new yacht rock station, Jugger Yacht.
For summer barbecues, road trips,
or relaxing poolside.
Hundreds of new exclusive stations, plus all your favorite local radio stations and podcasts. It's all on Odyssey.
Brought to you by Macy's, Geico, and Coke Zero Sugar.
Odyssey now has hundreds of new exclusive music stations for you to discover your new summer soundtrack.
Get moving with worthy workouts for a cardio sesh fueled by today's top artists.
Hanging with your crew? Throw it back with Picnic Party for old school jams for your cookout.
Or sail away with Odyssey's new yacht rock station, Jugger Yacht.
There are hundreds of new exclusive stations to check out today.
For summer barbecues,
road trips,
or relaxing poolside.
For every move, every interest, every passion. By Odyssey.
The Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the Radio.com app.
Who do you want? Who's your number one? A lot of you tweeting in a lot of different players. I think one of the things we need to do is go through the list of players tagged versus the list of players not tagged in the NFL. And it happened, a lot of stuff started breaking yesterday in terms of the players that were tagged. And I'm going to give it to you right now because the deadline has passed. All right, the deadline has passed, and we've got the list of players who were tagged and then a couple of the players that were not tagged that may have been a surprise to some people. First of all, we know that that Brandon Sheriff was tagged by the team. It was a non-exclusive tag, by the way. He's going to play 2021 for $18 million. A couple conversations I had with people late yesterday would be very surprised if Sheriff signed a long-term deal before July 15th. There's just, as we discussed yesterday, very little incentive now for him to do that. The second tag means that next year it's a lock that he becomes an unrestricted free agent, and his agent can simply tell him, you're the number one paid guard this year for a second consecutive season, because he was last year by nearly $1 million at 15, just over 15 million. He will be by this year. Joe Thuney was not tagged. He'll get the biggest guard deal in free agency, but it's not going to be $18 million a year. And if it's 15, that would more likely be the max. I think a lot of people projecting somewhere in the 14 plus million. So it's very possible that Sheriff will not only have the single biggest annual contract this year for the 1 year, $18 million, but it will be by somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $3.5 million as the top. You would have to offer Brandon Sheriff now enough money in guaranteed money that would look like the $18 million was guaranteed, and then the contract really was a contract in guaranteed money that started in 2022. Meaning, if you were to sign him to a deal that paid him $15.5 million, $15 million over 5 years, something like that, and you're talking about $75 million, he's probably going to need at least 45 to 50% of that in guaranteed money. So essentially $40 million, and then they'd want the 18 on top of that. So you'd be looking at 58 million in guaranteed money. That was explained to me by someone that is in the know on this thing, not necessarily specific to Sheriff. But the issue, by the way, and I asked this over and over again, and I asked several people yesterday, why haven't they gotten a long-term deal? And more people than not believe that it's Sheriff's, leverage in that. Why would he sign a long-term deal right now when he's scheduled to get $18 million? He forced the team's hand because he was going down that second path of franchise tag, and the team had no choice but to pay him the $18 million. And if they had turned him loose, which apparently, according to Sheriff's, the person I talked to, Sheriff's camp never thought that they would. They thought that they would tag him. But if they did, he'd hit free agency. And he'd get a long-term deal, and there would have been a bidding war for Brandon Sheriff. Trust me. Forget the injuries are a concern, but none of the injuries were super, super serious. And they all believe that Brandon Sheriff is an elite player at the position. Even if he isn't the best player at the position, he's an elite player at the position. He would have commanded a hell of a lot of money on the open market. He'll get that next year. Brandon Sheriff, it is an 80% chance that Brandon Sheriff is playing 2021 on the tag. If they work out a long-term deal, it's because the team got super aggressive and decided to make him an offer that he couldn't refuse. If it's not an offer that he can't refuse, he's playing 2021 at $18 million. We'll see what Keim knows about that at 7. Also on the list of players that were tagged, Chris Godwin in Tampa. Take him off your list. Tagged. Marcus May, the safety in New York, tagged. Taylor Moton, the tackle in Carolina, tagged. Allen Robinson, tagged. 2 of the 3 big wide receiver names, Robinson, Godwin. Galladay might be number 3 if you don't think it's Juju Smith-Schuster. 2 of those 3 tagged. Kenny Galladay not tagged. I think Galladay is going to end up in L.A. personally with Stafford and Sean. Allen Robinson, though, tagged. And by the way, Galladay may end up in L.A. on a 1-year deal. It's possible that. But more likely than not, they'd spread that out with the Rams cap situation to have a lower cap hit in year 1. Cam Robinson was a bit of a surprise. Tackle, Jacksonville. He got the tag. He started all 16 games last year in Jacksonville and played well. By the way, with the tag, with the cap being where it is, he's going to make just over $13 million as a tackle in the tag. Brandon Sheriff in his second year of the tag is going to make $18 million. Justin Simmons was tagged actually 2 days ago, the safety from Denver. Leonard Williams tagged. I forget if we had that before the end of the show. That's a second consecutive tag on Leonard Williams in New York. Giants. Leonard Williams, if you recall, was the player selected right after Brandon Sheriff was selected in the 2015 draft. That draft went Amari Cooper 4 to the Raiders, Brandon Sheriff 5 to Washington, and then Leonard Williams 6 to the Jets. Williams played really well last year, had 11.5 sacks. I loved Leonard Williams. Most of you who listened and have listened over the years know that that was the guy I wanted. I really liked Amari Cooper, but I loved Leonard Williams, and I was disappointed when they took Brandon Sheriff over Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams had some injuries, and that was the concern. I remember talking to Scott McLuhan on the air about Leonard Williams, and he said there were some injury concerns there. He liked Leonard Williams, but there were some injury concerns, and he wanted. So, they were they were thinking in terms of culture in 2015 too. And Brandon Sheriff, he knew, was going to be a guy that would start for 10 plus years. And whether it was a tackle or guard, and he expected it to be a tackle, they were going to have, as Scott McLuhan always said, a football player. I think I told this story on the show yesterday, and I know I've told it in the past. Scott McLuhan told me in that particular draft that the Giants desperately wanted Brandon Sheriff, wanted to trade up into Washington's spot to take Sheriff. They ended up drafting Eric Flowers, if you recall, at 8 overall. If there had been a trade offer attractive enough, McLuhan would have made the trade and would have drafted Todd Gurley. That's what he would have done in 2015. He told it that was not an off-the-air conversation with Scott. That was an on-the-air. That may have been off the air. Marcus Williams, safety, Saints, tagged. Also a bit of a surprise. And then you'll read that Dak Prescott was tagged. It was a procedural move after the record-setting deal was agreed to on Monday. And so I don't necessarily understand the mechanics of it, but the bottom line is he's not playing under the tag. He's playing under that contract extension. The list of players not tagged, Kenny Golladay was a surprise. You had Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, the two tight ends. One of them could be on my list of the number one player acquired. I like both of those players a lot. Shaq Griffin in Seattle, not tagged. Kenny Golladay, I mentioned. Aaron Jones in Green Bay, not tagged. I think Jones is a terrific back. Chris Carson in Seattle, there was some talk that he could get tagged. He did not get tagged. So there we go. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Give me your number one free agent or traded for player hope for Washington football. What are you hoping for over the next couple of weeks in terms of an acquisition? So we'll save the draft. Don't give me the draft guy. Number one free agent target or a number one player that you hope they trade for in the next few weeks. Your calls on that next. My answer when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980, team980.com.
CuriosityStream has thousands of documentary films and shows available on demand on any device. We're the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. There sure are a lot of streaming services, aren't there? CuriosityStream is the one you definitely need if you're the type to nature dock and chill, if you're an armchair astronaut, if you prefer physics to psychics, or perhaps you know a precocious paleontologist. Go to curiositystream.com to learn more and sign up today.
What's up, everyone? I'm Carmelo Anthony. And while you may know me as a basketball player, there's a whole lot more I'm ready to talk about. That's why I started What's in Your Glass, a show where we'll sit down for a glass of wine and a conversation with the biggest names in sports, music, media, and entertainment. Listen and follow What's in Your Glass, a presentation of Cadence 13 and Creative 7 with me, Carmelo Anthony, now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're all on this planet together, so join Odyssey and find your one thing. August is a great month to help out the environment by improving your gas mileage. Make sure your tires are properly inflated, and heavy items like golf clubs aren't stored in your trunk. Take your car in for a tune-up to ensure it's running at peak performance. And when the weather is nice, walk or bike to your destination to enjoy a beautiful summer day. Join Odyssey, and together, each of us doing one thing makes a greener tomorrow. What's your one thing?
The Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980 and the radio.com app.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Caps blew a 3-goal third-period lead, but won in overtime on Verana's goal, a minute 30 seconds into the extra session. 5-4 the final. The Caps have won 6 of their last 7. Patriots were busy yesterday. They traded for right tackle Trent Brown from the Raiders, restructured his deal. In return, the Pats sent a 5th-round pick to Vegas. They declined to tag guard Joe Thuney for a second time. He's a free agent. Packers declined the tag on Aaron Jones, and the Lions declined the tag, as we mentioned, on Kenny Golladay. Allen Robinson tagged by the Bears. That's not a shock. The Titans, by the way, are moving on from Malcolm Butler, the star of the Super Bowl a few years ago for the Patriots. Gonzaga, the number 1 team in the land, beat BYU, rallied from a 9-point second-half deficit to win the West Coast Conference Championship 88-78. They will likely go into the tournament as the number 1 overall seed. Wizards tonight against Memphis, 8 o'clock. Georgetown's first-round game in the Big East tournament today against Marquette at 3 o'clock. Pregame right here on the Team 980 starts at 2:45. What's the number 1 player for you in free agency? I have a couple. Like I have like a down-the-list guy that I really like. I really like Desmond King. I think Desmond King's a playmaker, and I think his best days are ahead of him. But in terms of what the number 1 overall, hope would be a trade for Deshaun Watson. That's easy. But it's also, to me, a long shot and not realistic. If that's not the case, I would, if it were like a second plus, called a second and a fourth, I would absolutely trade for Sam Darnold. I think he's got a lot of upside. I loved him coming out of SC. I think he's been in a terrible situation. I want the quarterback, and if the quarterback isn't elite, which would cost me a fortune, I still want an upgrade over what I have. I want a starter. I want a guy with major upside, and I would swing at Sam Darnold for a second and a fifth, or a second and a fourth. If it's going to cost me my first-round pick, I'm very hesitant to do that on Darnold. My belief is that Darnold is a guy that's going to end up, if traded, getting a late first-rounder or a very early second-rounder plus. So that right now, in terms of the player that I'd want traded for, acquired through free agency, would be among the things that are realistic, because I don't consider Deshaun Watson or Jameis Winston to be realistic. That would be number 1. Down the list, if you're looking for players, I like Corey Davis, but I think he's going to come for a big number. But I do like Corey Davis, and I think Desmond King is wildly underrated as a DB who played for the Chargers. He's a playmaker, by the way, can return kicks as well. I really loved him coming out of Iowa, and I like him now. Is he my number 1 player? No. Again, Deshaun Watson would be my number 1 player. If that's not available, and it probably isn't, in terms of what would be realistic, is I would trade a second and call it a fourth. I would. Or a second and one of the 2/3 for Sam Darnold. I would. I know many of you wouldn't. 301-230-0980. Let's try to sneak a few calls in here, and we will start with Wayne. Wayne, go ahead. Give me your number 1 Washington football free agent and or traded for player here, which will happen over the next few weeks.
Sam Darnold as well. I think with the market being pushed down because of the trade for Wentz, I think we can get him for this year's second and maybe next year's third or fourth or conditional pick. I like that he's still in his last or second to last year of his rookie deal, and I also like the intrigue of how he was under Gase, and maybe look at what happened to Tannehill when he got out from under Gase. And I think Sam Darnold's actually a better player. I think we can actually get him for a really good trade that works for the Jets and works for us.
Yeah, Darnold's going into his last year, so you'd have to pick up that 5th year on the 2022 option as a former first-rounder or restructure. Look, a lot of you I know don't like Sam Darnold because you look at the results and you look at the win-loss record. I've urged you to do this before. If you go back and watch a handful of games in the years that he played against some of the better teams, that's where he played well. He played his best against the best competition. When he was healthy and had a healthy group around him. Look, he's played in as dysfunctional a situation to start his career as anybody who's come here over the last 2 decades. It's been terrible there. Bay, go ahead.
Good morning, Captain. Good morning. Man, I'm trading for Aaron Rodgers. That's it. I'm trading for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. What do you got for real, though? Was that what Bay? That's all Bay had? Seriously, Bay? I mean, how many years have you been calling this show? And that's what you came up with? We'll get back to this a little bit later on. John Kimes coming up, but how about some good news? Even with the high unemployment, there's still a need for hundreds of thousands of IT and cybersecurity professionals, that is, in the U.S. right now. And My Computer Career is training people to help meet that demand. Go to mycomputercareer.edu. Take a free career evaluation. Doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't matter if you have IT experience. It doesn't matter if you've got education. It's not a problem. This isn't rocket science. It's My Computer Career. You could start your new life as an IT professional in as little as 4 months from the comfort and safety of your own home. Live online classes meet just twice a week to get what you'll need to start your new career. And here's the best part. My Computer Career is more than just a school. They'll help you get into the industry by working with hundreds of employers who then hire their students. My Computer Career is nationally accredited, and grants covering up to 53% of the cost are available to those who qualify. 53%. Classes start soon. Take the career evaluation today. It's free at mycomputercareer.edu. That's mycomputercareer.edu. Make sure they know that Kevin Sheehan from the Team 980 sent you.